Hello, welcome to YouTube Live. We have a pretty interesting talk today around docs. So let me introduce our guests. We, of course, have Jeff Posnick, who's over in the New York office, and with him we have Andy Diamondstein, who's actually our tech writer for YouTube.
How's it going?
Yep. Hey, Jeremy. Apologies that we are kind of sequestered in a little closet instead of our normal lush studio in New York City. But
yeah, rumors.
We're happy to have Andy visiting New York and showing him a good time.
Yes.
Good.
Wonderful so far.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be here.
Nice. Rumors out there was some concert or something that kicked you guys out or something along those lines.
Yeah, we were kind of bumped for Blondie, the band Blondie, which, that's the first time and probably the last time I will ever be able to say that. So, although who knows. So, yeah, we're broadcasting from a special undisclosed location for 1 week only.
Nice. Well, let's jump in because this is pretty exciting. So we're going to start asking Andy some questions, and he's going to fill us in a little bit. So tell us a little bit about what are the improvements coming with the V3 documentation, and just give us a little overview and kind of what we can expect.
Sure. So as I look, when I think about documenting YouTube services, I really want us to be able to do three things with our documentation. And I think right now we're doing maybe one of them in some places, or we're doing two of them in some places, but we're not really doing all three across the board. So those three things are, I want to tell you how something works. And we do that, that's what documentation is for, right? It's going to explain things to you. And we do a really good job of that, I think, or I hope, with the current documentation for the version 2 API. But then the next step is we want to, in addition to telling you how it works, to show you how it works. And that would involve integrating, a lot of code samples into the documentation so that when you read about, okay, well, you told me how to upload a video, show me how to upload a video. Give me some code, and give me code in different languages and code samples that I can actually use in my own, code. So showing you how it works would involve code samples and non-interactive demos. And then the third thing is we want to actually let you play with the functionality yourself and test it out, and not just see how it works by using it. And that would involve interactive demos. And then in the new API, we have something called the API Explorer, which lets you fill out parameter values for different requests, and you can see the request that's being submitted and the response that would come back. So an example of somewhere where we do that right now is with the YouTube player demo, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later. And that's something where you can test out a player and see how it works and configure it yourself, and then take the code and apply it in your own application. So I think being able to do all three of those things is really important for a complete set of documentation. To get there, we're going to build on some of the advantages of the platform that the API is using. That it's a standard platform for the current Google APIs that I think you guys have talked about.
Yeah, we have. So specifically, Andy's talking about what's going to apply to the docs for version 3 of the data API and for the new YouTube Analytics API, both of which were built on this standard platform. We could make use of the API Explorer and a bunch of other standard resources that, also another nice thing about having a standard platform, if you are using multiple Google APIs in the same project, things should look familiar to you. If you've read through the Google Plus docs, the new YouTube API docs should also have a very similar format, so that helps too.
Good point. So with the new APIs, we're going to be able to update client libraries really frequently, which I know has been a challenge with the old APIs. It's like if it's a bank holiday in France, and the person who updated, the person who wrote that client library is there. So we'll be able to update client libraries really quickly, and then because they're nicely integrated with the API, we can produce code samples really quickly, integrate those directly into the docs. Documentation for the new API is also generated in large part from the code base, and one of the challenges with a API that has a lot of functionality and a lot of developers working on it is just the flow of information, and getting, when developers make a change, knowing that that's happening and communicating it to you guys, the developers, as soon as it's available. And being able to generate documentation from the code base will make that a much simpler process, so that as changes go into the code base, we'll be able to just update the documentation almost automatically and get that functionality documented for you really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, that in particular will be great. I think right now the flow sometimes looks like some external developer happens to notice that one of the responses in the API isn't quite the same as it used to be, and then they will open a bug or they'll post about it somewhere, and then I'll find out about it, and then I'll tell Andy about it, and then Andy will make the changes, and then we'll publish it. So, being able to make sure that the documentation is almost always authoritative. I mean, obviously, there's still some manual intervention to say, hit publish, more or less. Right. We don't want docs just flying out every night willy-nilly. We do not want to obsolete Andy, among other
Thank
things.
You, please.
But yeah, it's going to be a nice automated process to a lot of extent.
Glad this isn't a farewell tour.
We're you
invite me out here and say goodbye to me.
Yes.
Well, I think one thing you did call out was the API Explorer, which I know when I've given some talks has been pretty exciting. And for folks, I think out there that are new to the V3 APIs, it's really nice if you want to get an idea of how it works. We're RESTful with our V3 API, but the neat thing is you can go to this API Explorer, you can fill out the fields, and it'll generate the URL for you and then show you what the response is, so you can start to kind of see what different flags do and what they bring in, and so you can cut down your information and things like that before you even jump into the code. And I know when I was learning it, at least V3, that really helped me, because then I had a great idea before I even jumped in to, for instance, I worked a little bit on the Java samples before I even jumped in. I knew what to look for, and it helped me identify and kind of work through things a lot quicker than just kind of going at it blind. So definitely check those out, and those were pretty popular in some of our sessions.
Sure. Would you mind if you take a few minutes and demonstrate that live too?
Yeah, that would be great. Actually, let's take a look.
Cool. So I'm going to pull that up now on our screen. So there are a couple different ways that you could get to the API Explorer. What you'll be able to do moving forward is go to a specific section of the docs. So right now, I don't know if the URL is very clearly visible, but this is developers.google.com/YouTube/v3 for version 3 of the Data API. And for instance, right over here, I'm drilling down. Let me make it maybe even a little bit bigger. I'm drilling down to a specific method in the docs search list, and this is how you do a video search. So Andy pushed out some docs right before we started the show, and I'm not positive that, and I'm also not positive this has anything to do with Andy, because ideally down here at the bottom during this try it section, there would be an embedded version of the API Explorer, where whenever you're looking at the method for particular call, there is an API Explorer specifically for that method on the same page as the docs, and that'll be great. And we'll just figure out why the current version of the docs that was just pushed out doesn't have that. But there's also a standalone version of the API Explorer, which is exactly the same functionality. It's actually nice having the on-page version, because you can see a description of all the different parameters, and then quickly go down to the bottom of the page and say, okay, this is the possible values for order, and then plug it right in on the same page. That being said, here we'll just go to the standalone version, which is part of the overall Google APIs Explorer. So there's a bunch of different APIs that you can try this with. We're on the version for the Data API. right now. I'll also just quickly mention, and I think we might talk a little bit more about this later, version 3 of the data API is still not fully publicly available. It's still protected by a whitelist, and there's a sign-up process. So despite that, people could use this API Explorer even if you haven't been whitelisted. Anybody out there who's interested in getting started and just playing around with the API, you could do it using this API Explorer. So that's kind of cool. Even if you've been patiently waiting for the full public release, you don't have to wait to use this.
So, Jeff, when do you think that will be lifted, that white list?
Yeah, I think we had an answer from Vladimir, who joined us in one of these sessions probably a month or so ago, who made a promise that was kind of vague, but it was along the lines of soonish. I think soonish still kind of applies. So no specific dates to announce right now, but stay tuned, because we are making exciting announcements all the time, and I think we'll talk a little bit more at the very end of the show about another exciting announcement related to a launch that we just made.
Yeah, so soonish, follow our Google Plus account, and you'll know as soon as that whitelist has been lifted.
Yeah. So just to give an example, though, of how the API Explorer works, so this is for the youtube.search.list method, and I'm going to search for YouTube API as my query string. I could put in some other parameters over here. Oh, this is actually really nice. I didn't even realize it did this. When you click on one of the fields, it gives you the possible values, which
is pretty nice.
That's cool. Yeah, so I can sort by.
I might not be needed after all.
Well, yeah, not at all. So some cool things over here, but then if I just click execute, I get back to JSON. So the default response format for all the new APIs is JSON. You see that there's 82,000 videos that match YouTube API, and you get back information about the first 5. Get back the video IDs over here. And so play around using the API Explorer. I think it's a great way to get started when you're or satisfy your hunger to use version 3 of the API before it's publicly released.
Also, V3, one of the other cool things is, you can reduce the amount of information you get back just to get what you need. So if you just need a couple of those fields, you can actually, in the API Explorer, specify, I just need this and this, and then you can see it come back, so you can see you pared down exactly to just what you need. So obviously that will be less traffic coming back and forth, so your app will be faster.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. So I know you talked a little bit about the documentation being dynamic from the code base. Can you could you tell us a little more information about the actual code samples being dynamic?
Sure.
Yeah. You could. Okay. Andy and I are still kind of working out the whole.
Yeah. So we're working out the details, but Jeff really produced has tested a bunch of different functions and been the first person to do so, and he's produced a lot of.
Jeremy has to.
And
before you give
Jeremy,
me full credit, and Gareth and the rest of the team is going to.
I try to, suck up to the people who I'm
going
to spend the most time with in the next couple of days. So,
I would say Jeff has done the most languages by far.
Well, fair. Okay.
So we all agree. Okay. So anyway, whoever has been working on the API has been producing some great code samples, and so we want to make those code samples available to developers, just as give me the Python code for uploading a video or the Ruby code or whatever, but also want to have that same code available in the documentation. And one of the challenges with that type of approach is, if the code sample changes, how do you make sure that the documentation changes to reflect the change in the code sample? And so we're working out a system where basically the code sample will be updated in one place, and it'll be integrated directly into the documentation. So when the code sample changes, the documentation changes, but also that the file that's made available to developers is changing at the same time, and it's all the same file. And so that'll be, I think, really helpful and kind of a key component of this documentation strategy of showing you how to do things and making the code available in different places. One of the things that I've learned, and I'm a relatively bad programmer who knows how to, I'm a relatively bad programmer who knows enough about programming to do a lot of things, but the wrong way in many cases. So it's always helpful to me to see examples of how people do things. And I know that, one of the things that I'd like to do is make the APIs accessible to as many people as we can. And so when I look at like the player demo, I think that's something that makes the player API accessible to someone who really doesn't know very much about programming at all. And I think that, the people who are watching this video, probably have a very different range of programming skills and probably approach their development in different ways. So some people will go and read the documentation and try to figure out how something works. Some people will start with a code sample and then they'll say, okay, well, I have this code sample, but how do I, do this one thing that's missing in the code sample? And for documentation to be helpful to all those people, it has to really, support all these different approaches to development. And so no matter which of those approaches you take, if you're the person who wants to just start with the code samples, you should be able to just go and get the code samples. If you're the person who wants to read about how something works first, you should be able to do that. If you're someone who just wants to toy around and play with how the functionality works, you should be able to do that. And I think the integrated code samples are all part of that. I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be cool.
Yeah, so they're not live in the documentation yet. They will be. Hopefully soonish. Also soonish.
Soonish.
Maybe soonish was slightly before the public launch, but not exactly
hopefully,
sure.
Yeah.
That's great to hear. Now, I know there's something else coming with it, something called Google Developer Academy. So I'm guessing, Jeff, you're going to cover this, but tell us a little bit what it is for people that don't know, and then what we can expect that's coming soon.
Sure. Google Developer Academy is an initiative across a bunch of teams in developer relations. So it's not something specific to the YouTube API. And the idea is to provide, more structured, kind of educational type resources, things structured around the concept of a course that you might take that's divided into different lessons, and each lesson teaches you one specific skill. And kind of, I think the overall idea is, you might pick up individual skills in a lesson, but you also really need the framework of like a larger course to show how everything fits together. So it's fine if you know how to do, YouTube embed, but if you don't know what the significance of doing a YouTube embed is when it comes to, then using the YouTube Player API to make changes to that embed or to control the embed, it's only so valuable. So we wanted to give like an end-to-end example for folks to work through on their own pace and end up with like some working pretty cool code, hopefully. So we've done that already for one specific course, and that's been a course around the YouTube Player APIs. I put that out a few months ago, and you can get to it from developers.google.com/academy, I believe, and that's like the landing page that you can go to and see all the courses that are available for a bunch of different APIs, including the YouTube APIs. So that existing course walks you through doing an embed, using the iframe Player API to actually jump to specific portions of the video, and at the same time have like some HTML on the page that will give you the ability to like define chapters within a video. So, this might be an example video. If you wanted to embed what you're watching right now on a page, there's different sections of our talk, and you might say, okay, at the 15-minute mark, that's when we did the demo of the API Explorer. So you want to make it easy for folks to jump to that specific portion of the video. So if you go through the whole course that we have available, you'll know how to build an embedded player that lets you do that sort of thing. That's what's out there right now. I'm also working on a new course, and I believe it's going to be focused on the analytics API, and it's going to kind of walk folks through like a more hands-on example. And this is a little bit above and beyond the code samples that we were talking about earlier with when Andy was saying how we want to include code samples in line with the docs. Those will be standalone programs, but they're mainly standalone programs that illustrate how to do one specific thing with the API. So this new analytics API course will show you how to do like a full integration using both the data API and the analytics API. And the idea is to like show you how you could take analytics data and store it in a local database. So that's on tap. Hopefully we'll get that done pretty soon. A lot of other stuff going on too, but check out that in the near future.
Cool. Yeah, the new analytics API is pretty neat, especially for anybody that's used the old Insight one, because before you'd get a zip file with a bunch of CSV files, and you'd have to go through those and handle those. But now you can get directly either JSON or a CSV response back, which makes your life a lot easier.
Yep.
So I think we've kind of talked about when all these changes are coming out. There seems to be a buzzword I've been hearing, but did you guys want to cover that?
No.
Still soonish?
I didn't want to give any specifics in this.
Okay, so we're still at soonish.
Soonish.
Well, actually, there's one more thing I'd like to cover with the documentation. So you showed the API Explorer, which is really cool and helps you get a great start with the data API. But of course, we have another API that's used for consuming video, which is the player API. So if any of you have used the iframe embed, it's a pretty neat little API that kind of switches between it does switch between Flash and HTML, so you can support a lot of environments. But you may want to customize it a little bit. So can you guys tell us what resources we give for them for that?
Sure, and I'll let Andy drive this one since this is very much child of his creation. Yeah, okay, that's a fair description. Yeah.
So this is the YouTube player demo, and this is something that I looked at this again as kind of someone who's not an expert level programmer, and when I was asked to document the player APIs or to update the documentation for the player APIs, I always found myself like I would create a page and it would have a player in it, and then I would go in and have to keep editing the code to see how the player looked, and it would just take a really long time to just to like see what worked and see how it looked, and there's just a lot of opening a file and updating it, and
there's something like 20 different player parameters.
Yeah, and they're supported on different. So we have an AS2 player and an AS3 player. The AS2 player is deprecated. Please, move.
Yeah, I think we're supposed to fire off last week.
Okay.
But yeah.
So we had an AS2 player. But there's the AS3 player, and now there's the iframe player, and different players support different parameters, and it was just really time consuming to test anything. And and I figured if it's time consuming for me and it's hard for me to figure out what's a good way to do it, well, people who don't spend their entire work days at YouTube probably, and can't just walk over and ask people on the player team what to do, it's probably even harder for them. And so can I expand this? And
yeah, absolutely.
Stay with. So this is a way basically and there's also two different components of the player APIs. One is there's a content component, so you're controlling what content shows up and how it plays back or pauses or when it starts, and then you can also control the display of the player. and there's different parameters to do that. And so what this demo lets you do is basically customize a player and see how it looks. You can see the API calls that it's making, and you can see, and then you can also see the embed code that if you want to display that same player on your own page, that you can just copy the embed code and stick it right on your page. So if I can do a quick example, when you get to, here I probably moved our computer, which I wasn't supposed to do. If you get to the URL, it's developers.google.com/YouTube/YouTube_player_demo. So, it just comes with a video preload. But let's say I want to instead load a list of uploaded videos for the Google developers user. So I can do that. I can click Update Player. And then
Pause
that. Okay. So you're seeing that the Google developers users videos are coming up. As you scroll down on the page, you'll see that it's loaded a playlist of that user's videos. Here's all the videos in the playlist. If you scroll further down, you can see all of the events that were triggered and the function calls that the API was doing to load that information. And then if you scroll down even further, you can see the embed code, and you can just copy this directly into your page if you want to show an iframe player that shows a list of the Google developers users uploaded videos. If you want the AS3 player, you can use the object embed code. And so, again, for me, the goal was both, self-interested. I want to make this easier for myself to test, but also I want to make it, I want our things to be accessible to people who aren't really experienced programmers. And I think that, hopefully this is the type of tool that will be really helpful to those people, and then also really helpful to people who are experienced programmers, but maybe in a different way, and just helping those people be more efficient. And then the other thing that this demo does, if I go ahead and you'll see that on the right here, there's a list of player parameters, and these are things that you would use to control the display of the player. And so you could say, well, when my player loads, what I really want it to do is start playing the video immediately, and instead of using the dark theme, I want to use the light theme. So when you'll see that the dark bars here, when we update to the light theme, you should see a light bar there. So we've done that. This is the second video in that playlist. But you can see that it's light, and the video starts playing automatically. If you go down here, you'll see that the embed code has updated to include those parameters, so that when you put this player on your page, it's going to function, with that functionality. And again, the goal was to make it easy to just test things out and see how they work. And so you might say, okay, well, let me play this, and you'll see that there's a red bar here. And so you might say, I don't like that red bar. I want to go with the white instead.
Yeah, I can see how that would. You can see how that saves you a lot of time.
And then you'll see that it's white there. Just a way to test things out really quickly. And so now that we have that for the player, I'd like to hopefully have that same type of functionality for the new data API as well.
Great. Yeah, I could see how that would reduce your time a lot. I know I've had to do that on not just video players, but on pages when you're trying to get the look and feel just right of refreshing and then changing, editing, refreshing. So that's great. That should help reduce your time kind of skinning the player. So we covered a lot of changes, which is great, and these are all coming soon. Is there anything else we should be looking for? I feel like there's so much great stuff coming. I couldn't imagine there'd be anything more. But is there anything we missed?
No, I don't know. Do you have anything secret?
Yeah, I probably shouldn't talk.
Okay. So you got the API Explorer, you got the player basically Explorer to edit those, and then we have dynamic code that'll show up, as well as dynamic documentation. So definitely start checking that out now and start playing with it. Again, check out the API Explorer; it's really awesome. And if you're using the player API, check out the player API demo that he just did. It'll help you save a lot of time. So actually, I was going to talk a little bit about the Silicon Valley Code Camp. I just did that last week, and so I did a presentation for beginners, and what I basically covered was how you want to use the data API and the player API. Kind of a lot of what you guys covered, the API Explorer, and then a little bit just about the player in general. So we're going to be coming around. Check a lot of the material that I covered. It was pretty relatively cheap, but a lot of the material I covered is actually in a lot of these Google Developer Live little meetings we have. So definitely, go back through, if this is your first time, definitely go back through to some of the videos and check them out, and you'll get a lot of that information if you weren't able to show up to one of these, whether it was last weekend's event or any future events. This is just kind of a quick way that we wanted to be able to give you the same information without you having to go to an event. So definitely check old videos as well. Let's see. Any questions? Let's check out the questions while I'm here. Actually, Analytics API whitelisted. When will that be lifted, Jeff?
Yeah, so we did have a question about that from, I don't know if it was from someone anonymous or what, but it was somebody who wanted to know on the Google moderator when the YouTube Analytics API would be publicly available. So again, this is not the version 3 of the data API that we're talking about now. This is the separate YouTube Analytics API. And for folks who follow us on Google Plus or on our announcement mail group, you probably got a message earlier today from me saying that we are publicly available at this point with the Analytics API. So if you have previously tried to sign up and you've been waiting on the wait list, that wait list is gone. Everybody could go and turn on the API now in the API console. We have a great set of docs by Andy, courtesy of Andy. We're getting started with the Analytics API. I think we have one kind of somewhat complete code sample in the docs that you can work through now. We have that course for Google Developers Academy that I'm working on, and we'll have a little bit more sample code in different languages coming soon. And it's kind of important to note that we are launching this API right now in experimental mode. So it's flagged as an experimental API. It kind of has some legal meanings according to our terms of service, which I won't try to fully interpret in a live talk, lest I say something inaccurate. But we are in experimental mode. One of the main things that will probably be changing with the API over the next couple of months, and this hopefully should not be a breaking change, but what will be happening is that we're going to be rolling out additional metrics. So folks who are looking through the docs right now, you'll see a somewhat limited set of metrics that you could use in your reports in comparison to what you could do via the website right now. When you run a YouTube Analytics report via the website, there are certain things that are available that you can't do in the API, but that's kind of one of the criteria for moving out of experimental mode. Once we do add in those additional metrics and we have more parity, I think you'll see the experimental label drop, and it'll be a fully launched supported API. But I don't want to scare people away with the experimental label. Definitely get out there and start trying things out. Let us know what your feedback is. We're still early enough with the life of the API that your feedback really matters and could affect design decisions and things like that. So let us know probably via the issue tracker with any feature requests or bug reports. And if you have any general questions about using the API, like programming type questions, you should use Stack Overflow for that. Don't use that for feature requests or for bug reports, though. It's more like, how do I do this? And you give me the sample code, and I'll say, hey, you need to change X, Y, Z.
Great. That's good to hear. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, me too.
All right. So the last question is Google developers, are we hiring? And the question is yes. So if you're interested in being a developer advocate or being in a developer relations role, just check out developer.google.com/jobs. There's a lot of positions open, including, I believe, a YouTube one. So definitely, if you're interested, check that out. So
looking for tech writers?
We are also looking for tech writers.
Oh, great. That doesn't
we're
mean
not,
Andy's leaving, though.
Special
No,
site.
we need more. This is all part of a very elaborate prank in which we make Andy find his
This is hilarious, guys.
Before shoving him off screen.
All right, Andy. Well, thanks a lot for taking the time to join us. We really appreciate it, and giving us kind of a preview of all the exciting things that are coming. And I really look forward to the next quarter and seeing a lot of things roll out. So thanks for everyone for joining us. Thanks, Jeff, too, for all the great information. And we will see you here next week.
Bye.
Bye.